Okay, so Donald Trump made history becoming the second president ever to serve two non-consecutive terms following up Grover Cleveland. But now there's been a lot of talk about this idea that he wants to serve a third term, which is technically illegal under the Constitution, but here's one way he could actually get around it. The standard for presidents serving two terms was set by George Washington, who agreed to only do two terms as president, but that was largely because he was feeling very sick at the end of his second term and didn't want to continue. For almost a century, every president honored George Washington's wishes to try and follow the two-term standard until Ulysses S. Grant, who tried to get a third term mainly because his wife wanted to keep living in the White House, and she actually had to be escorted out by security after they had to leave when his second term ended. And the second president to try and get a third term was Theodore Roosevelt, who argued that because he wasn't actually elected in the year 1900, it was William McKinley, but he served out his term because William McKinley was assassinated, he should be the one to get the nomination in 1912. Then finally, a president got a third and a fourth term with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who passed away during his fourth term, and because that in 1951, because they felt that was just too much power, they established the 22nd Amendment, which limited the president to two terms. Now enter Donald Trump, who said he's interested in serving a third term as president, and there are ways to do it. Now, obviously, the first way would be to get Congress to change the Constitution, but that requires 66 senators, which he definitely does not have, as well as 2/3 of the House, which again, he definitely does not have. And then there's no guarantee even half of Republicans would vote for it. So that's not likely, but there is actually one path that he might be able to get the presidency for a third term. That's because the president is actually allowed to serve longer than 8 years in office. The president is allowed to serve 10 years. This actually got tested once before by President Lyndon B. Johnson, who tried to run for president again in 1968 after he was reelected in 64, and he became president in 1962 after the passing of John F. Kennedy, so he made the argument that he should be able to run in 68 because he technically didn't serve two terms and he would fall within the 10-year limit if he did so. So he was constitutionally allowed, but he ultimately dropped out because his polling was terrible. That brings us to one possibility which many legal scholars have argued, and that's the idea of Vance Trump. This whole idea that J.D. Vance could run for president, Donald Trump runs for vice president, and then on the first day, J.D. Vance resigns and makes Donald Trump the president of the United States, where he'd be given 2 more years in office. And there is a lot of questions on that because technically the vice president is supposed to be someone who can legally become president, and that's why Arnold Schwarzenegger was never mentioned as a VP, even though that was talked about a little bit in 2012 with Mitt Romney. But still, there is this possibility that could happen because the argument is Trump would have 2 years. Really, this all comes down to the Supreme Court, which 5 of the justices are on Trump's side, with 3 of them actually being appointed by Trump in his first term. But I ultimately don't think they'll go with it because when it came to January 6th and Trump trying to stay in power, they all said no to him. So I don't think he'd be given a third term, but this might be the argument Trump tries to go for. Yeah, we live in a weird world, but this is Red, Blue, and You, and I'm Charles Peralta. Please subscribe and learn something.